The president's innocence, having done nothing wrong, has been proven over and over again. There's not a single stitch of evidence of collusion. He didn't have anything to do with Russians. He made no deals with Russians. He didn't get elected because of Russians.
Well, let's bring in Jay Sekulow. He's the chief counsel for American Center for Law and Justice and a member of President Trump's legal team. Good morning to you, Jay. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. We talked about Paul Manafort a little bit at the top of the show. Today's jury selection for his trial, which is the first trial arising from the Robert Mueller probe. The president has said there's no collusion. In fact, the July 6th court filing even says the government won't present evidence of collusion with Russia. Right. President and your whole team have said there's no collusion. What is next in this special counsel investigation?
Well, look, I mean, you look at the investigation. It started off as a rather irregular investigation, to say the least, with the salacious and unverified dossier. Then I'm not going to recite all of the issues, but then you had the lead investigator situation with Peter Strzok. You had Bruce Orr, the number 4 at the Department of Justice. His wife was working at Fusion GPS, who put together the dossier with Chris Steele. And on it goes. So where we are now is, look, I've never been one to give dates on when this thing wraps up, but I will say this. It needs to wrap up for the good of the country. We need to get this behind us. As Rudy Giuliani said yesterday, which was rather, I know it got a lot of attention, but it's quite unremarkable. Collusion is not a crime. Well, there's not any evidence of any collusion here involving our client and the Russians. So let's just make that factual statement for the record here. So we've seen nothing in the literally 1.4 million documents that have been sent over by the White House and many more that have been sent over by the campaign that indicates any kind of Russian involvement with the Trump campaign, especially as far as the President of the United States goes, but even with other people. But collusion isn't a crime. So that I think that was just twisted out of context. I mean, all the commentators saying, well, technically Rudy Giuliani was correct. Collusion is not a crime. Well, that's not just technically correct. I mean, that's actually the law. But there's no violation of law, statute, rule, or regulation that we have seen after reviewing this case for a year. And I think Bob Mueller will come to the same conclusion. Now, look, he'll write his report. We'll deal with ours. But at the end of the day, this process needs to come to an end quickly. It's been a year, and we're ready to move on, and we'll see what happens. I'm not going to predict the next move because this is Washington, D.C. Yeah. You never say never to anything.
Hey, Jay, if it ends, what are we going to talk about all day?
Well, you know, there's a lot of things to talk about, and one is a case that I have, and that is a client that is an American that's in a prison. It was in a prison for Turkey for 21 months, and we're glad he's been released to house arrest. That was a good first step. I will tell you, the President of the United States has been incredibly engaged directly securing his release, and the President has told me on numerous occasions, and the family has been informed of this as well, that the President's not resting until our client, Andrew Brunson, pastor for 23 years in Turkey, is returned to the United States.
What has the President of Turkey
that's
said?
The next thing.
What has the President of Turkey said, Erdogan? This pastor was swept up in a consolidation of power he did in 2016 as he fought off a coup. We've seen that country move in an increasingly authoritarian and Islamist direction. Has he said anything about whether eventually this pastor will be released?
Well, look, I mean, it used to be Turkey was the bridge to the West. I mean, this was the modern Islamic State, the model Islamic State. Things have changed a bit in Turkey, but I will say this. Look, I'm encouraged by this move, allowing our client to go from a Turkish prison, as you can't even imagine what that was like, to his home. And he's under home confinement. But the Turkish officials have the authority to release Andrew Brunson. I believe we're going to see a release of Andrew Brunson, returning him to the United States soon. And I know the administration, as I said, the President, Secretary Pompeo, Vice President Pence and their teams are working diligently on this, as we are. And we've had great support, bipartisan support in the United States Senate. We've had great support also in the United Nations, where his case was taken up of one of 30 by the UN Committee on Arbitrary Detention. But I will tell you this, the President's leading the charge here to get our client released, and he knows how to negotiate with Erdogan, and I'm quite confident that we'll get a good result.
Jay, tell us a little bit about this guy. He's a pastor. What is Christian? What denomination? Tell us about his wife. How are they staying safe?
And what did he do to wind up in prison?
Well, the charge actually, when we got the indictment, the charge was Christianization. I mean, that's what it said in the actual, when you translated the Turkish, it was Christianization. That was, he was sharing the gospel in Turkey at a church of, a small church, Presbyterian, this comes out of the Presbyterian tradition, a small church in Izmir, Turkey. That would be New Testament times, that would be Smyrna. And he was picked up in this coup. The interesting thing was, when the coup took place, he was in the United States. He came back to Turkey not thinking he was a subject at risk, and he gets picked up in this. And I think it's clear to say that, as the president has called him, he's pretty much been a political hostage. I am optimistic. I've done a number of these, and you all have been great. Let me just say this. Fox has been great in covering these cases over the years. We've had a lot of these. This one has been a little bit more difficult because we've got a NATO partner here, a NATO ally. It should have been an easier case to get the Americans released, and that just hasn't happened yet. But the president's committed to doing it, and I'm convinced we're going to see it happen.
All right. Jay
Soon.
Sekulow, joining us from our nation's capital. Jay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Reminds
Thank you
us
for having me.
how great this country is, the freedoms we have. We can't take that for granted. Thank you, Jay.